Hello, everybody. Today we are gathered here to explore the complex interplay between tribal identities, colonial legacies, and the emergence of modern national movements in Egypt. Central to our discussion is the question: how do the historical trajectories and contemporary practices of the Bedouin and Nubian tribes in Egypt influence cultural preservation and integration within Egyptian society amidst the consequences of colonialism? We aim to answer this by examining the legacies of these tribes and their interactions with the broader impacts of French and British colonial rule. The Bedouins, originating from the Arabian Peninsula, adapted to North Africa's harsh desert climates, maintaining rich oral traditions and robust tribal customs that emphasize resilience. Conversely, the Nubians, situated along the fertile Nile, are known for their historical kingdoms and architectural prowess. The 1960s Aswan High Dam project, which displaced many Nubians, significantly impacted their cultural continuity, pushing them towards a fight for cultural and linguistic preservation. The Bedouins have traditionally been nomadic pastoralists, known for their camel and goat herding. They are famous for their survival skills in the harsh desert environment and their unique tribal codes, which emphasize honor, hospitality, and loyalty. An example of their traditional lifestyle is the Bedouin practice of setting up temporary camps, known as Beit Shar, or House of Hair, referring to the tents made from goat hair. The Nubian people, on the other hand, have a rich history dating back to ancient civilizations along the Nile in what is now southern Egypt and northern Sudan. A significant event, as we just discussed, for the Nubian community was the construction of the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s, which led to the displacement of many Nubians. This event submerged their ancestral lands and forced them to relocate, leading to a cultural and social upheaval that is still being addressed today. The British occupation of Egypt began in 1882 after the defeat of Egyptian nationalist forces at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir. British rule was marked by political and economic control aiming to protect its interests in the Suez Canal, a vital route to India. Political changes and the birth of national parties. The British initially ruled through a veiled protectorate, manipulating the local monarchy and elites to maintain control. This indirect rule fostered nationalist sentiments, leading to the formation of political groups like the Waft Party, which played a significant role in Egypt's push for independence. British administration focused on modernizing Egypt's infrastructure and educational system, albeit primarily to benefit colonial administration and commerce. The establishment of secular schools and universities during this period laid the groundwork for a more educated middle class. The British focus on cotton cultivation for export markets transformed Egypt's agricultural landscape, but also led to economic disparities and rural disaffection. This economic model benefited foreign investors and local elites, leaving behind a legacy of economic dependency and giving rise to a multitude of political resistance movements. The Waft Party advocated for complete and immediate independence from British rule. It was characterized by its liberal ideologies and was pushing for constitutional reform, parliamentary democracy, and civil rights. Their key achievements were that they led the negotiations for the 1922 Declaration of Egyptian Independence, dominated Egyptian politics in the pre-World War II era, holding power intermittently through democratic elections, and that they were instrumental in the crafting of the 1923 Constitution. As for the Muslim Brotherhood, it was founded in 1928 by Hassan el-Banna. The Muslim Brotherhood started as a socio-religious movement advocating for Islamic reform and education. They sought to infuse Islamic principles into daily governance and societal norms. Its agenda included the promotion of Islamic morals, charity work, opposition to Western cultural influence, and later resistance against Zionist movements in Palestine. Their key achievements were that they played a significant role in the social and educational landscape by establishing mosques, schools, and hospitals. They grew into a pan-Islamic movement with branches and influences extending beyond Egypt, and they became increasingly political over time, especially after the 1952 revolution led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, although this later led to severe crackdowns on its members. Parallel to these political upheavals was the rise of the national feminist movement, notably marked by the establishment of the Egyptian Feminist Union in 1923 by Huda Sharawi. This movement advocated for substantial reforms including enhanced educational opportunities, voting rights, and legal recognition for women, challenging entrenched gender roles and advocating for a reformed societal structure that recognized women as full participants. The Bedouins, Nubians, and political movements. Reflecting on our research question, the Bedouins and Nubians have engaged with Egypt's political movements in different capacities. The Bedouins' strategic importance in the Sinai has often positioned them in complex negotiations with the state, impacting security policies and local governance. The Nubians, profoundly affected by displacement, have leveraged political advocacy to champion the right to return to their ancestral lands and to fight for the preservation of their culture in the face of modernization and assimilation pressures. The Egyptian government has often engaged Bedouin leaders in efforts to maintain security in the Sinai region. This relationship has been double-edged, with cooperation at times, but also conflict, especially when government policies have threatened their nomadic lifestyle or land rights. The Bedouins have historically had limited direct involvement in national political parties. However, their support has been courted by various governments, especially in issues related to territorial rights and local governments. The Nubians have increasingly organized to advocate for their rights, forming associations that lobby for the recognition of their cultural heritage and the right to return to their lands around Lake Nasser. Unlike the Bedouins, Nubians have been more integrated into the national political discourse, partly due to their forced resettlement closer to urban centers. They have engaged with national political parties in the Egyptian movement to address these specific issues. Despite their significant historical and cultural contributions to Egypt, both the Bedouins and Nubians have often been marginalized in national policy-making processes. Their geographic isolation and distinct cultural identities have contributed to this exclusion. In response to their marginalization, both communities have increasingly mobilized. For the Nubians, this has often taken the form of organized political and cultural advocacy. For the Bedouins, while less organized in political terms, there has been increasing engagement with governmental and non-governmental organizations to address issues such as economic development and social services. Contemporary practices among the Bedouins have evolved, but many still retain elements of their traditional culture through oral histories, poetry, and music. These elements not only serve as a form of entertainment, but also as mechanisms for preserving their cultural identity and educating younger generations about their heritage. For the Nubians, contemporary practices have heavily focused on cultural revival and preservation, particularly in the wake of their displacement. Efforts include the documentation of Nubian languages which are at risk of extinction, the celebration of Nubian arts and crafts, and the revitalization of traditional Nubian architecture in resettled communities. Integration of both Bedouin and Nubian tribes into broader Egyptian society has been influenced by both internal dynamics and external pressures, including the legacies of colonialism. While these tribes have maintained distinct identities, there has been an ongoing interplay between tradition and modernity. For example, many Bedouins and Nubians have migrated to urban areas for economic opportunities, which has facilitated cultural exchange but also raised issues regarding the preservation of their unique cultural identities within a predominantly Arab Egyptian context. The legacies of French and British colonialism in Egypt have significantly impacted both tribes, primarily through the imposition of new political and economic structures that disrupted traditional lifestyles. The colonial emphasis on state-centralized control and economic exploitation marginalized tribal economies and altered social structures, compelling tribes to adapt in various ways. This adaptation was often in the form of altered land use practices, changes in social hierarchy, and shifts in cultural practices. In sum, the cultural preservation and societal integration of the Bedouin and Nubian tribes in Egypt are significantly influenced by their historical trajectories and contemporary practices within the framework of colonial and post-colonial impacts. The political dynamics introduced by the Wafd Party and the Muslim Brotherhood, along with the transformative efforts of the feminist movement, illustrate a complex interplay of resistance, adaptation, and advocacy. These movements not only reflect the aspirations of the Egyptian populace, but also highlight the unique challenges faced by marginalized communities in maintaining their cultural identities amidst national and global changes. Our exploration today provides a deeper understanding of these dynamics, offering insights into the continuous negotiation between tradition and modernity in Egyptian society. Thank you for your engagement in this vital discussion.